Welcome to Hope Lies Waiting. I'm Joy, and this is part two of the story of my life's journey. It's going to be focusing on the emotional issues that I have dealt with during my life. This will need a trigger warning. I am going to be making some hopefully brief references to suicide attempts, suicidal ideation, self harm, and abuse. If you're not in a good place right now, this may not be the best time to be watching this video. Please, I encourage you, seek out local resources and find some help. Many times it is not family or friends that are the best people to turn to. Sometimes you find the loving support and care that you need from people who don't even know you, as I will show in this video. So please, I know how difficult it is, but seek help if you need it, because it is out there and it does make a difference. The emotional part of my life's journey has been the most difficult by far. I have always suffered from depression. There is a family history of mental illness on my father's side, so I know that it is at least in part hereditary. And alongside depression, its good friend anxiety is almost always to be found. That, in many ways, has ended up lingering with me as something to deal with, even though I am now being successfully treated for the depression. But overshadowing both of those, and no doubt magnifying and exaggerating them, is that both of my parents were narcissists. It is only a couple of years ago that I came to this realization. Narcissism was not something discussed at all when I was a child. And to be honest, it still doesn't get discussed nearly often enough, considering what a real problem it can be, especially for children of narcissistic parents. There is plenty of information online here on YouTube and other places regarding narcissism and its impact on family dynamics. I encourage you, if you're interested in the subject, to go ahead and look them up. I'm going to bring up, of course, things that my parents did that are very typical of narcissists in raising my siblings and I. But I'll avoid going into too much detail, or this particular video could run on for a very, very long time. One more thing I want to mention, I don't know if it arose from the depression, the narcissistic abuse, some combination of factors, but I have always felt like an outsider, that I'm in a place that I'm not meant to be. Think of finding a duck in the middle of the desert, as an example. There's nothing wrong with the duck itself. There's nothing wrong with the desert, but the desert is not the place the duck really should be. So how does all of this tie into my life's journey and how I was affected emotionally through the events in my life? Obviously, the depression was a downer. I never felt happy. I couldn't understand how so many people around me were constantly smiling and laughing and just acting so cheerful. And I never felt those things. I never felt happy. I was never really cheerful. I could laugh, and occasionally, when it was something very humorous, I could give a genuine laugh, but a lot of time my laughter was simply forced, just simply to trying to appear normal, so to speak. Anxiety hit me very hard, especially with respect to social relationships. I didn't want to try to engage with others, Part of that, of course, came from the bullying that I was experiencing because of my physical differences that I had mentioned in part one. At home, there was no acknowledgement of my depression, even though I know my parents had to have recognized it for what it was, considering the family history on my dad's side. Um, his own mother had been placed in a mental institution for a short time, and then she was moved into various nursing homes for the rest of her life. It hurt as a teenager to learn my paternal grandmother had been alive all along up until the day she died when I was in junior high school. And yet our parents had led us to believe that she had been dead before we were even born. It was part of that narcissistic component of they don't want to acknowledge things that conflict with their need for having the perfect life, of being the best of the best. It was a stigma inherited from their generation when you simply did not talk about mental illness at all. It was something that was hidden, it was kept closeted. But that aside, I was expected to behave and act like a normal child. So on those days where depression was just sapping my energy, but my parents wanted me doing chores, I had to do my best to pull myself together to get my chores done. On those occasions where I couldn't pull myself together enough, I could not generate enough energy to get myself to be able to do those things, I would be beaten. Physical punishment, commonly accepted part of my parents' generation as punishment for children that weren't doing what they were told to do. I don't remember that ever getting too bad. My sister remembers it far worse than I do. I don't know if it's a matter of I have intentionally blocked memories of the physical abuse, or if she in fact was treated worse than I was, which is a very real possibility, especially during our very young years. If you recall from my part one, I had been getting studied at a medical center on a monthly basis because of my precocious puberty. Let's face it, no parents want to be taking their kids to a doctor's appointment bruised and welts and that sort of thing on their body. So if my parents were upset at me and they couldn't take it on me because I had an appointment upcoming the next few days, they very easily could have taken it out on my sister instead. And that has left me with a sense of guilt, understanding that might have happened, even though I do also understand that it is not my fault. It is my parents' fault. They were not treating us correctly. Small things that our parents would do would be set my siblings and I against each other. In addition to my sister, we have an older brother. Nothing overt, but just little ways to keep us kind of at odds with each other because, of course, as narcissists, they wanted all of our love and affection going to them. Our mother also had a habit of not using our names unless we were in very big trouble. If she just simply wanted to talk to us or ask us to do something for her, she would jumble up all of our names together and end it with something like, you know who I mean, which undermined our sense of self identity and self worth. We weren't people, it was more like we were just objects there for her convenience. Our father would be away on business trips fairly often, and when he was home, most of his attention, if he was giving any to his children, would generally be focused on our brother. So that left our mother the main parental source of comfort for dealing with problems that children deal with and trying to, just figure out this thing called life. With my depression, I had a great need to feel comforted, supported, loved. That was just something my mom really never gave to me. I can remember one occasion when I was feeling very, very badly, and I really just, all I wanted was a hug. And so I walked into the living room, and she was sitting in a chair reading a book, TV on in the background, and I asked her if I could cuddle and get a hug. And she responded, "Go away, I'm busy right now. I don't have time for you." That sort of thing just really, I think, compounded that feeling of being an unwanted outsider in the household. I wasn't something that was loved or wanted. I was something that was tolerated as long as I was useful. On the other hand, mom at least was rarely the source of punishment. If I had done something they decided was wrong, dad would be the one that would punish me. One of my biggest memories from the things he did was a day that was one of my more severe depressive episodes, and my energy just was not there. I just could not summon it up. The expectation for me that night is I was supposed to be doing dishes after dinner. We didn't have a dishwasher. We hand washed everything. I couldn't get myself to do it. And my dad was getting angrier and angrier at me. And I'm trying to explain that I wasn't feeling good, that it wasn't that I was just trying to avoid it, as I genuinely wasn't feeling good enough to be able to do it. He just suddenly screamed at me that I needed to get them done or he was going to hit me. My immediate response was to blurt out, "Then I guess you never loved me." And he proceeded to give me the biggest beating of my life. And so I was standing there in the kitchen, doing dishes, in pain, suffering from the depression. And of course, when it's time to go to bed, couldn't sleep on my back, had to sleep on my stomach. So that's a couple of examples of some of the things our parents would do when we were growing up. As you can probably see at this point, I don't really want to go into a lot of detail about some of the other things that happened. I just wanted to give a couple of basics. I did have one saving grace for myself in my parents' eyes, even if my life was kind of revolving around coping with depression on my own without guidance. And that was that I was exceptionally smart. My IQ tested at the gifted level. My parents told me that the school district had approached them about having me enrolled in a new program they were developing for highly gifted students, but they declined. They decided that they would rather have me going to school with normal children than to school with smarter children, which did not help my self-esteem, my self-identity at all, because it was basically a way of them saying that I wasn't normal in their eyes, that there was something wrong with me. What I've since found out, of course, is to my mind, it's like you would think a narcissist would love having a child that is exceptionally smart because, well, it's their child. I mean, it's something for them to brag about. It is something my parents did do with friends and coworkers. But as a child, you don't want to be too much smarter than your parents because that starts undermining a narcissist's sense of how wonderful they themselves are. Suddenly they're not as wonderful because their child is that much better at something than they are. What can I do? I had no control over how intelligent I was. I wasn't about to put in less than my best effort in school. School, in a way, was an escape for me. It was a place that I could learn, I get through school, I graduate out of high school, I can get out of the house, be out on my own. To my child's mind, no longer having to live with my parents was going to solve all of my problems. I'd no longer be depressed. I'd no longer have the anxiety. I would no longer have to put up with their abuse. Well, things didn't turn out that way, but I'll get to that in a little bit. I don't want to leave anybody with the impression that my parents were simply terrible, evil people. They were insecure people, which is what narcissists are underneath everything else. They're insecure. They themselves had lacked getting the necessary support that they needed as children themselves. It caused them to rely on what was considered normal for their generation when it came to raising children, which, of course, now it's just, we look back on that and it's just like hideous how people used to be able to get away with treating their children with the beatings and all the other stuff. I guess the best way to put it is they simply didn't know better. They did not have the teachers that they needed to learn how to build healthy families. And so they just fell back on what they knew. And there's one, actually, excuse me, there are two things I do want to credit them for in raising me. One is they taught me the value of effort for reward. We had our assigned chores for a week, for each week that we were expected to do. But our parents had also come up with a list of additional chores that we could do to earn extra money to supplement the allowances that we were getting. And yeah, it felt really good to be doing that extra work and to earn the money. It set me up with very good work ethic for once I did become an adult and start working. The second thing is going to sound really strange, but having the freedom just to run around loose outdoors as a child, to not be constantly under their scrutiny, which I think is unfortunate that children today pretty much are stuck under the constant scrutiny of some adult at all times, instead of being allowed to go out and just play and have fun without any worries. So at least in that respect, I can appreciate those opportunities that we were given by our parents from their lack of oversight on us a lot of the time, to make the occasional mistake and learn from those mistakes and learn how to make decisions. How to react when approached by strangers would be something that I also learned from them. Yeah, the narcissistic abuse was there. It comes in many different forms. A lot of the methods are subtle. A lot of times, parents aren't even consciously aware that they're doing these things or the negative impact that those things have on their children. But it doesn't change that it happened, and that had a profound effect on me growing up. So basically, I was just in survive childhood mode, live with what was going on, figure out ways to deal with my depression so that I could still function, deal with my anxiety so I could still interact with others, basically find ways to be normal so I would be unnoticed. I would be kind of an invisible child. And I managed to get through childhood. I did understand that the anxiety I was experiencing when interacting with others wasn't normal, that if I was doing something at school that required me to go up on stage, what I was experiencing was more than just the simple stage fright that people would assume it was. That kind of made me decide to push myself into trying to get into situations where I would have to have a spotlight on me in the front of groups of people to see if the repeated exposure would tackle and cancel out the anxiety. Unfortunately, it didn't, but I would still do those things. One more thing before I move out of my childhood that I think is worth bringing up, because it kind of sums up how I ended up feeling to be the outsider that didn't belong fairly well. The summer of my 15th birthday, I had been accepted into an exclusive summer school program at one of those really expensive private prep schools. It was a program that was mostly designed to give students from what are considered disadvantaged schools a chance to get to see what things were like at some of the better higher education institutions. So it was my first summer away from home alone for more than a couple of days. I was there for 6 weeks. And of course, you'd be living in dormitories. The day of my 15th birthday was pretty much an ordinary day. Woke up, went to the Commons for breakfast, went to classes, went to lunch, went back to classes, went to dinner, went back to my room in the dorm, did some studying, got to be pretty late, and went to bed. About an hour and a half after I went to bed, there's a knocking on my door from one of the girls saying that I had a phone call from my mom. And why didn't I tell her that it was my birthday? Her being the girl in the dorm, not my mom, of course. But anyway, at that point, I'm just sleepy headed because I was woken up. So I go have the conversation with my mom. My mom is, oh, I forgot about the time difference. I hope this isn't too late. I just remembered that I should call and give you a happy birthday. And this is what your sister and I did today to celebrate your birthday. And she's going on and on about how they baked a cake together and how they decorated the cake together and how they blew out candles for me because I wasn't there and how they ate the cake. Okay. Am I supposed to care? I just want to get to sleep. It's late for me. You woke me up. But of course, knowing the routine with my mom is kind of too polite to say some of what I was thinking, so I just responded minimally as politely as I could and get off the phone. And I'm walking back to my room, and a bunch of the girls in the dorm then come up to me going, why didn't you tell us it's your birthday? If you had told us it was your birthday, we could have had a party. And just me being sensitive to word choice, having lived with narcissistic parents, the only thing I can think of is they don't care that it's my birthday. What they care about is they lost out on an excuse to have party food. All I could do was just say, sorry, I didn't think to mention it, and went off to bed. At the end of the session, it was time for everybody to return to their homes. The dorm mother giving out quote unquote report cards on student behavior. The dorm number said that while I was diligent in the chores that were assigned to me to do within the dorm, that I was considered very unfriendly. Nobody ever talked to me about this perception or anything. Nobody ever got my side of it. If they had, and I could have told them, I'm suffering from depression. Maybe they would have understood things better, but maybe not. But yeah, no, it was just, nope, I'm an unfriendly person. Just that entire summer kind of set in stone what my self-image was going to be for the next several decades.